My name is Emma Carter, and I was 33 years old on the day my own family decided the man I loved wasn't good enough to become part of our family. The church was already full when I stood behind the heavy oak doors of St. Matthew's Church in Columbus, Ohio. My wedding dress fit perfectly. White lilies rested in my trembling hands. Every detail had come together exactly the way I'd dreamed since I was a little girl. But none of it mattered. Through the thin wooden doors, I could hear my father's voice echoing across the hallway. She could have had a future with a lawyer or a surgeon. Instead, she threw it all away for a mechanic who spends his life under broken cars. A wave of laughter rolled through the room. Then my older brother made it even worse. Give it 5 years. She'll be paying the mortgage while he changes oil and fixes flat tires. More laughter followed. Each laugh felt like another crack in my heart. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath, refusing to let them see me cry. For nearly a year, I'd listened to comments like these. Daniel Brooks, my husband-to-be, never argued. He never tried to prove anyone wrong. He simply smiled politely, shook their hands, and went back to work 6 days a week at a small neighborhood auto repair shop. To my family, grease-stained hands meant failure. To me, those same hands had repaired an elderly widow's car without charging her a single dollar because she couldn't afford the bill. Those same hands had worked 16-hour days after his father died, so his younger sister could graduate from college without drowning in student debt. Those same hands had held mine through every difficult day and never once made me question whether I was loved. Daniel never measured people by their bank accounts. He measured them by their character. Unfortunately, my family had always believed the exact opposite. They admired expensive suits, luxury cars, prestigious job titles, and large homes. Kindness meant nothing if it didn't come with a 6-figure salary. I worked as an elementary school teacher. Daniel earned enough fixing cars to cover our rent and basic bills. We weren't wealthy. We weren't even comfortable. One unexpected expense could throw our entire budget into chaos. Yet every single night, Daniel would look at me with complete confidence and say the same words. One day we'll build something that's truly ours. And somehow, I always believed him. Just then, a gentle knock broke my thoughts. The wedding coordinator stepped inside, looking visibly uncomfortable. "Emma," she whispered, "your father has refused to introduce Daniel as his son-in-law during the ceremony." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Outside, another burst of laughter echoed through the church. Then the sound of tires stopped outside the front entrance. The laughter inside slowly faded. Conversations turned into whispers. Curious guests began looking toward the stained glass windows facing the bay parking lot. Someone had just arrived. I couldn't see who it was, but judging by the sudden silence spreading through the sanctuary, whoever had stepped out of that black luxury SUV wasn't an ordinary guest. Seconds later, the front doors opened. Every head in the church turned at once, and instead of walking toward my father, the visitor walked straight toward Daniel. The silence lasted only a few seconds before my father let out a dry, dismissive laugh, probably someone who walked into the wrong church. He said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. A few relatives chuckled, and the conversation slowly started again. But the knot in my stomach only tightened. The wedding coordinator looked at me with genuine concern. "Emma, are you absolutely sure about this?" I lowered my eyes to the engagement ring Daniel had spent nearly 18 months saving for. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't expensive. But every overtime shift, every missed weekend, and every sacrifice he'd made was wrapped around my finger. I smiled through the tears. I've never been more certain of anything. A moment later, the dressing room door swung open without a knock. My father stepped inside. His tailored navy suit was perfectly pressed, his expression as cold as ever. He looked less like a father on his daughter's wedding day and more like a businessman, protecting his reputation. "I'm giving you one last chance," he said firmly. "Walk away now and I'll help you start over." For a moment, I simply stared at him. "You'd rather cancel your own daughter's wedding than accept the man she loves? I'd rather save you from wasting your future." The words hit harder than I expected. "Daniel isn't a failure," I whispered. My father gave a cold smile. "No, he's simply comfortable living like one." He turned toward the door but stopped before leaving. When people ask what my son-in-law does for a living, I refuse to embarrass myself by telling them he fixes engines. The door closed behind him. So did the last piece of hope I still had for my family. Minutes later, the chapel doors opened. The music began. Every guest stood as I stepped into the aisle, alone. My mother couldn't even look at me. My brother wore a smug smile, as if he'd already been proven right. Whispers spread through the church. Her father actually refused to walk her down the aisle. I heard he begged her to cancel the wedding. What a heartbreaking mess. At the altar, Daniel looked at me, and the moment he realized I was walking alone, the smile disappeared from his face. He instinctively took one step toward me. I gave the smallest shake of my head. No, don't let them turn this into another humiliation. He understood immediately. When I finally reached him, his eyes were filled with guilt. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I gently squeezed his hands. This isn't your fault. The officiant had barely begun speaking when the heavy wooden doors at the back of the chapel slowly opened. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Several impeccably dressed executives entered the church, followed by a distinguished man in his 60s. A quiet murmur spread across the room. Wait, isn't that Richard Lawson? The Lawson automotive guy? What's he doing here? Even some of the local business owners looked stunned. My father's confident expression disappeared. For years, he dreamed of meeting Richard Lawson. Now the man he'd admired most was standing only a few feet away. The CEO ignored every wealthy guest in the room. He ignored my father. He ignored the front row family members. Instead, a warm smile spread across his face the moment he saw Daniel. He walked straight toward my husband, extended his hand, and spoke with the kind of respect that silenced the entire church. Daniel Brooks, he said with a smile. I've been looking forward to this day for a very long time. The entire chapel fell silent. My father immediately straightened his jacket. For years, Richard Carter had attended charity galas, business dinners, and networking events, hoping one day to earn the respect of Columbus's most influential executives. A confident smile spread across his face. For a brief moment, he clearly believed Richard Lawson had come to greet him. Instead, the CEO walked right past him. Without the slightest hesitation, Richard Lawson stopped directly in front of Daniel. A genuine smile crossed his face as he extended his hand. Daniel Brooks, he said warmly. Congratulations. Daniel blinked in surprise before shaking his hand. Mr. Lawson, I honestly didn't expect to see you here. Richard Lawson smiled. There was no chance I was going to miss your wedding. The chapel erupted into whispers. Is that Richard Lawson? The CEO of Lawson Automotive Group? Why does he know the groom? I looked from Daniel to Mr. Lawson, completely confused. Daniel had never once mentioned knowing one of Ohio's most respected business leaders. My father stepped forward with an awkward smile. Mr. Lawson, I'm Richard Carter, the bride's father. The CEO shook his hand politely. It's a pleasure to meet you. Then almost immediately, he turned back toward Daniel. My father's smile slowly faded. He wasn't used to being ignored. Neither was the rest of my family. Richard Lawson looked around the chapel before speaking. I imagine most of you know Daniel as the young mechanic who fixes cars. Several guests nodded. The CEO smiled, but that's only the job he gets paid to do. The man standing before you has spent years doing something far more valuable. The room became perfectly still. People think great companies are built by brilliant executives. He shook his head. Sometimes they're built by ordinary people who refuse to stop helping others. He turned toward Daniel. 3 years ago, someone told me about a young mechanic who stayed after work every evening, teaching unemployed men and women the skills they needed to rebuild their lives. I felt my heart skip. Daniel had always told me he was simply working late. He never told me he was changing lives. So I visited his garage. Then I came back. And every visit showed me the same thing. Daniel wasn't chasing success. He was creating it for everyone around him. The silence inside the chapel became overwhelming. I offered him one of the highest-paying management positions in my company. He paused. He turned me down. Gasps echoed throughout the church. He told me there were too many families depending on him. Richard Lawson's voice softened. That day I realized something money can never buy. Character. He reached inside his suit jacket and removed a sealed envelope. I didn't come here today just to congratulate you. He stepped closer to Daniel. I came because I need your help. Daniel looked genuinely surprised. My help? Richard Lawson nodded. Our company is launching the largest technical training and apprenticeship program in Ohio. I don't want an executive to lead it. I don't want a consultant. I want the man who changes lives when nobody is watching. He handed Daniel the envelope. Daniel Brooks, I want you to become the founding executive director of the Lawson Technical Academy. He smiled proudly. I wouldn't trust anyone else with the future of my company. For several long seconds, no one in the chapel moved. Daniel looked down at the envelope before slowly raising his eyes. You're serious? He asked quietly. Richard Lawson smiled. And I've never been more serious. He turned toward the guests. For 3 years, we've searched for the right person to lead this program. We interviewed executives, consultants, our industry experts, Then he looked at Daniel. But the person we were searching for was never sitting behind a corner office. He was working in a small neighborhood garage, quietly changing lives one person at a time. For one heartbeat, the chapel remained silent. Then someone near the back started clapping. Another guest joined. Then another. Within seconds, the entire church was on its feet. The applause rolled through the chapel like thunder. Richard Lawson opened the envelope. Inside was an official partnership agreement. We want Brooks Automotive Solutions to become the exclusive training partner for Lawson Automotive Group across Ohio. Another wave of astonished whispers swept through the room. This partnership will create hundreds of apprenticeships over the next 5 years. He looked directly at Daniel. And I don't want someone who simply understands business, I want someone who understands people. Or will you accept? Daniel looked at me. In that single glance, I remembered every late night, every unpaid bill, every sacrifice, every promise we'd refused to give up. I smiled through my tears. He smiled back. Then he turned toward Richard Lawson. I'll accept, but only if every young person who joins this program receives the same opportunity someone once gave me. The CEO smiled. That's exactly why I chose you. The applause became even louder. For the first time that day, my tears weren't born from humiliation. They came from overwhelming pride. As the celebration continued, Richard Lawson noticed my father standing alone near the back of the chapel. He quietly walked over to him. My father forced an uneasy smile. Or Mr. Lawson? The CEO looked at him calmly. Richard, I've spent 30 years building successful companies, and finding talented people is easy. Finding people with character is incredibly rare. He glanced toward Daniel. You spent years looking at his profession. I spent one afternoon looking at his character. That's why he's leading the future of my company. While everyone else was still trying to measure his worth. My father lowered his head. For the first time in my life, he had no words. A few moments later, he slowly walked toward us. His voice barely rose above a whisper. Emma, Daniel, I was wrong. He looked directly into Daniel's eyes. I judged your job instead of your character. I confused wealth with worth there. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. He could have reminded my father of every insult, every joke, every humiliation. Instead, he stepped forward and extended his hand. We can't change yesterday, Richard. But we can decide what kind of people we'll be tomorrow. My father's hands trembled as he accepted the handshake. It was the handshake he should have offered the very first day they met. 1 year later, Brooks Automotive Solutions and Lawson Automotive Group had opened apprenticeship centers across Ohio, creating opportunities for hundreds of young people to build meaningful careers. I left teaching to lead our community outreach programs, helping students discover skilled trades, scholarships, and futures they once believed were impossible. Looking back now, I finally understand something my family never did. Real success isn't measured by luxury cars, expensive suits, or impressive job titles. Real success is measured by the lives you change, the promises you keep, and the people who become stronger because you believed in them. The day my family called my husband a nobody, they revealed the limits of their own character. The day one of Ohio's most respected CEOs trusted him with the future of his company. The rest of us discovered a truth I'll never forget. Real greatness never announces itself. It quietly serves others, until the world has no choice but to stand up and shake its hand.